Well, thank you, Dennis, and hello to everybody here in Tulare and around the world. I've been a part of this project for the last several years, and so I woke up this morning just feeling incredibly energized and excited for the day to finally be kicking this initiative off. And I've been so encouraged as we've heard from all the different speakers, just because of the consistent messages that we've heard today, and hopefully that's, as Kathryn said, pretty comforting to all of us that we agree, and it's time to move agriculture forward. So, I want to say thank you so much to Western Growers' commitment and to all the people who have come alongside Western Growers and are leading this initiative forward. As Dennis said, my name is Candace Wilson, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Green Venus. Green Venus is an ag startup who has developed a platform, a non-GMO speed breeding platform that's enabled by the Nobel Prize-winning CRISPR technology. And we are really excited about the possibilities of this technology, specifically in changing the plant architecture and enabling robotics to do what they need to do to help with the harvest. So I'm going to let each one of these panelists introduce themselves and provide a little bit of background about who they are and what their organization is contributing to these efforts. Go ahead.
Well, good morning, or afternoon, I guess it is. I'm still asleep. That lunch just put me over the edge. Anyway, my name's Ted Batkin. I'm actually a retired person. I've actually retired about 4 times, it seems, in the last 7 or 8 years. But I spent most of my career managing commodity board research programs, first in the vegetable crop arena for tomatoes, potatoes, celery, melons, and started the carrots and pepper programs. And then from there I went to the citrus research program. For 20 years I was the president of the California Citrus Research Board and then chairman of the National Citrus Research Committee. And our purpose for being on here today was the activities that we did in the citrus program in developing a robotic harvester for citrus. And it was quite an interesting process in the fact that we were able to put together all of the components with the exception of one. And we had the platforms and all of the algorithms and everything to map the tree, but the end effector was the deciding factor. And you've heard this from a number of the speakers before, the importance of that. So that's one of the things I'll be focusing on and talking about as we go forward with this initiative, is to get that last bit to get over the hill, if you would, and make something that's effective.
Well, good afternoon. My name's Neill Callis. I'm with Turlock Fruit Company. A little bit about my background. I had a 20-year career as a project manager, systems engineer, as a NASA contractor before my father-in-law invited me to join the family farming business. And, you know, my interest and my role in this automation and mechanization initiative has been to try to be the loudest voice about some of the hardest crops that are some of the crops are going to be the hardest to automate and mechanize. In my case, is melons and asparagus. And you know, in my prior background, I had a lot of experience with open source software systems. And once we had that fateful meeting, I think it was in 2019 in Orange County, where one of the venture capitalists in the room turned to me and said, how many cartons of melons are shipped in a year? You know, whatever it was, say 18 million or something. And you, okay, well, what's the problem space that you're trying to solve by mechanizing the harvest? Well, $1 to $2 a carton. And there were 5 or 6 VCs in the room. They all looked at me and said, we're not interested. There's not enough opportunity to develop a solution to that particular problem. So that led directly into the conversation of the value of a modular platform to solve not just asparagus or melons or other difficult crops, but to build something that can be used across all the platforms. So that's my interest, and I'm just super excited about what's happening here. So
Good afternoon. My name is Kathryn Verheerdwuizen. I'm from Oxbow International, and we're a member of the Pfluger Oxbow Group. So we're a niche market egg manufacturer. We play in a lot of the specialty markets. Like Mike said, some of the specialty crops have been mechanized, and those are the areas that we play today. So, blueberries is a big business for us. We do grapes for wine. We do veg from the perspective of a lot of processed veg. And I did notice one of the harvesters you had up there, Mike, was a pea combine, so I appreciated the shout out to the pea combine. And we design and develop and manufacture, and then we also do support some of our equipment around the globe. And I met Dennis a little over a year ago, and we were talking about, this group had come together in 2019, and the question was, well, who's going to build some of this stuff? And it may or may not be us, but I think that everyone's alluded to the fact that these are complicated, challenging projects, and like Neill just said, the single industries can't do it alone. We look at crops and we try to help find solutions, but we really need to have this larger understanding. How can we do stuff that's more common, that's more modular? How can we not invent every single subsystem? And so we're here to participate and to lend some of our expertise in the, not the huge thousands of unit manufacturing, but in smaller scale, but medium scale manufacturing, and what that looks like, and what that looks like for field support, what that looks like for ground truthing, getting out in the field, and those inevitable problems when the field and the crop just don't quite cooperate. So that's who I am.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We do have a panelist who is absent from here today due to COVID. Her name is Jenny Maloney, and she is leading the North America Strategic Accounts team from Bayer Crop Science. And I think that it's important to recognize Bayer's commitment to breeding right now, and there have been several people who have brought up plant genetics. And while it's not nearly as glamorous as an AI model or the very interesting work that lots of the robotics companies are doing, plant breeding is going to be a very, very important piece of bringing this whole vision together. And I always like to point out the fact that it also can be the limiting factor. We're talking about speed here. And the genetics companies have been placing bets on where they think the future of agriculture is going. But those plant breeders today need to know what the robotics need. What does the machinery need to look like? Because it's going to take 5 to 20 years for them to change the architecture of the plants and the trees that we're talking about. So Bayer's crop science and the work that they're doing with plant breeding, I'm going to try to speak on behalf of Jenny a few times today, but plant breeding will be a really important piece of this. So I would like now to just open up the conversation to the panelists and talk a little bit about what are your perspectives on what the approach has been in the last 10 years, and why is it time for us to turn the page? Anybody?
Well, unaccustomed as I am to just jumping in with both feet and trying to get them both inside my mouth at the same time, and I seem to be successful at that. But over the past 10 years, I've had the opportunity to take a real close look at what is going on in the robotic development era. First with the citrus board when we were developing the citrus harvester, and then I spent 2 years as a consultant to a company called the Brain Corporation. And I want to mention this because it was a fascinating drill in frustration that was funded by Qualcomm as a part of their think tank group in San Diego. And the objective of the Brain Corporation was to get a robot that would train itself. It would actually think like a human brain, and then it would learn by looking at what it was doing and training itself. And the reason I mention this as part of this discussion is because the president of the company's focus was on strawberries. And he just knew that he could build a robotic harvester for strawberries that would go out and go down the row and teach itself how to find and pick and correct strawberries. Well, unfortunately, it was one of those adventures that was more cerebral and less hands-on and applicable. And after spending 2 years and a whole lot of Qualcomm's money, about 15 million, they found out that they could not teach a robot how to pick a strawberry. And the purpose of mentioning this and bringing it up is that it shows that there have been just a wide range of attempts at trying to get these robots to work. And what has been lacking in the process is a coalition of multiple disciplines working as a team to develop something, as opposed to a whole bunch of verticals. And we talk about silos, and the people working in silos. That has to end, or that prediction of getting 2% in 10 years and 3% in 20 years will be fact. So to get around that, we have to be a team. There has to be this effort that WGA has started, and believe me, we have been talking about this for years, because I get to be the old man on the panel, and that's only because I am, is that, USDA 12 years ago put together a robotics team to try and do this, and it didn't work. And other institutions have tried to do it individually, and they don't work. It's this collaborative effort that we're putting together now with this initiative that will get us over the hump and make it work. That's just my opinion from an old man's perspective.
Well, let me jump on that too, because I think it's worth highlighting. And again, this is putting on my grower hat. Our feeling, those of us in the cantaloupe and melon industries, those of us, the few remaining California asparagus farmers, we see about a 10-year glide slope until labor simply isn't available. I've been with Turlock Fruit Company nearly a decade, and I haven't seen anybody younger than me joining the company in the field or in the packing shed. So there is a real sense of urgency here to meet that time frame that you've talked about. And, to sort of put another slant on this too, if you think about a great book that was published in 2005, The Long Emergency, and that's a book about peak oil and what happens when eventually it's no longer economical to extract oil for use as a fossil fuel. And leaving aside the climate change discussion, just the idea that at some point that could occur, there's a general sense among people who know and understand the issue that there will be some panacea, some magic savior, some silver bullet that will descend and save us all. It'll be hydrogen. It'll be electric cars. It'll be this. It'll be that. And it really is the intellectual realization that that's not going to happen. And so coming back to this effort, that was my realization. There wasn't going to be a company. Elon Musk is not going to save us, for example. He's not going to come solve this problem for us. And it really is this kind of a coalition and the difficult bottoms-up work that has to happen to build the tech stack, to enable the startups, to solve that last mile, the end effector problem. That's why this, in my view, is just so critical.
Yeah, to jump on that, and Candace, you said, what's the last 10 years been like? It's a lot of people trying to be really good at all the things, right? I think Mike pointed that out too in his presentation. To think that we're all experts in everything from compliance to to the chain, the support chain. I mean, no one by themselves really can be. Even large manufacturers or large companies can't be experts in all the spaces. And when we each try to do it on our own, whether that's each try to do it on our own as a crop type or each try to do it on our own as, to all the different functions, we need to rely on each other and work together and say, all right, you're really good at robotics, I'm really good at metal, you're really good at AI, let's come together and build a stack and get farther down the road. Because going at it one by one, we're burning a lot of money and we're burning a lot of time.
And I think that's a really important point, Kathryn. The growers, and maybe Neill, you can speak to some of this perspective, but a lot of the struggle that I've heard as I've been engaging with growers throughout the industry is the amount of ag startups that show up on their doorstep, want to learn about their farming operations, and get their resources and access to their farms to do their own trialing. So, Neill, can you talk a little bit about the complexity of navigating all these ag startups that are wanting your attention?
Well, and that, I think it's important for companies like Turlock Fruit to make bandwidth available to support the startups. I will say my experience, it's not that it's complex, it's more that it becomes an exercise in I'm telling a story to them that disappoints them because their product is not going to work for us. Because they've come up with a concept and they want to ground truth it, but they've essentially got a sealed box and it either fits in that spot or it doesn't. And for us, I mean, especially during the early days of drones, going back 5 or 6 years when the drone thing was a big deal and the imagery, the near infrared and imagery was a big deal, I would always come back and I'd sit down with my father-in-law, who's a master, melon farmer, and what can we do with this, Steve? And Steve's like, you tell me. We don't have the precision irrigation or fertigation systems to address a corner of a field that's weak 6 weeks into the growing process. It's just you shoot the whole field or you don't. There's no way to act on the data. So that's been a learning process, though, for the growers as well, as I think the startups that have come to visit us.
Sure, I think that just further supports the need for all of us to be working together and having those conversations. While you have the microphone, Neill is also a board member at the Western Growers Association. So I would like to just hear some of your perspectives, Neill, the enthusiasm, maybe talk about the board's excitement and energy around this initiative.
Well, and I would say that, look, I can't speak for the whole board, but I can speak for myself as a board member. There's a lot of excitement about what's happening here. There's, of course, trepidation about the amount of resources it may take to get this going. So, again, just as I take it upon myself to be the loudest asparagus advocate in the room, within the board, I'm trying to be the loudest advocate for what we're trying to do with the Innovation Center and with this common tech stack. Because the board, you have representatives there from the biggest players in the biggest industries to one of the last asparagus farmers farming 300 acres of asparagus, and so you have a range of potential beneficial outcomes, and they're not all going to affect all the people, all the businesses represented, all the industries represented on the board the same. But having said that, I know the board is anxious to see this thing get going and anxious to see some output and see the tech stack and work and understand that connection between the common modular platform and how the startups can leverage it down the road.
Thank you. Kathryn, I would love to hear a little bit more about the significance of the standardization.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it goes to the point, right, of 400 different crops in the state of California, and all of these crops needing slightly different or slightly specialized parts. But it's like, does everything need to be special? I know that it was mentioned earlier, right? Farmers and the farming community is passionately individualistic, and that plays out into how people farm and how they grow things. But doing 100 different ways to harvest 400 different crops is we're not going to get there. We're not going to get to scale. We're not going to get to something that can be supported. Someone brought it up. I can't remember who, but there's going to be new training of employees, right, for more complex in-field or in-plant equipment, and so there needs to be standardization there. And so you think about how many common components are on the shelves, this 80% idea. If we can pull in more common components, and then we can specialize if and where we need to, that really opens up some economies of scale. It opens up easier support down the road because equipment needs support, and all these crops are perishable. And so, the more commonality, so whether that's from a systems perspective, from off-the-shelf components, from even common chassis that can carry different types of end effectors or different types of arms that can interact with crops differently. That's how we're going to get there. I don't see a way globally or domestically in California how you can get there with all of these crops if we have to do it all uniquely.
Yep. Ted, I have a question for you too. So you've been such a great voice on our committee, just about what you think it's going to take to really carry this baton all the way to the finish line. Do you have any insights or recommendations on how we're going to be successful?
Well, thank you, and I do, and it goes back to something that I learned very early on in my life, and I have a sign that I carry with me from office to office that says simply, "Make something happen today." And what has to be guarded against is hours and hours and hours of happy talk, because happy talk doesn't make anything happen. It just makes everybody feel good. And to get this process and move this initiative across the finish line, I'm sorry for that metaphor, but it's really what we're trying to do. We have to guard against falling into the trap of happy talk and saying, oh, everything's wonderful, and we did this and we did that and everything. But if you don't make something happen to move that forward, it won't happen. And so this initiative is getting away from happy talk to making something happen today, which will get us to the end result.
I think that's amazing advice. And I remember, Dennis, 2 years ago when we were at Harris Ranch, we concluded the meeting with, let's go, let's just go. So here we are kicking off this initiative, and hopefully we're all pretty excited about just getting started. I would like to just conclude with hearing more from each one of the panelists. We're probably winding down on time, but talk to us about why you and your organizations have remained committed to this initiative, and maybe what do you think success looks like? So at the 5-year mark and the 10-year mark, how do you envision the farm and the industry? Anybody?
Well, I can jump in. I mean, the reason that Turlock Fruit remains involved and will remain committed, where we farm in western Fresno County, it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's already hard to get people to work there. And we farm between 4,000 and 5,000 acres. If we don't have people or machines or something to harvest cantaloupes, honeydews, melons, and asparagus, well, I guess we can put in almonds or pistachios. The problem is every other farmer up and down I-5 is going to do the same thing. And you look at the price of those two commodities and how they've fallen in the last 8 or 9 years, it won't work. We're not going to be able to abandon specialty crops in favor of something easier like almonds. So it's do or die time over a 10-year period from my point of view. So we'll do whatever we can to make this work. But what does success look like? To me, success looks like some form of a harvester that can get melons off the ground so I can get them into a packing shed. Because I know the technology exists, that once I've got those melons in the shed, we can go a long way towards automating and mechanizing that piece of the business. But that's the hardest part, is getting them off the ground and into a box or a bin so we can get them to market. But that's success.
Kathryn?
We remain committed, and we're excited to be a part of the group. And I think it's the collaboration between all kinds of different players in the industry. And you alluded to it at the beginning, Candace, but that was something that I brought up early on. Is it does come down to plants too. Some of the plants that we're growing today that are that we bred or we've used because they're great for hand harvest is not going to necessarily be the plants that we need to be growing in the future. And so I think, we have to have this open conversation between growers and industry and what's coming down the pipe. I mean, you look at what Washington has done with, trellising and new varietals, and it does start there. And if we're whoever the collective we, right, if we're developing equipment for the old style of crops, we need to all make some adjustments. So we're involved in this space to understand, we love specialty agriculture. And so we're here to see where we fit and how we can help and what that is, if that's expertise or if that's understanding compliance or specialty crops or whatever it is. We're invested and we're excited about the future because we think specialty crops should be grown here, and we want to be a part of what that looks like in the future. So what does the future look like? I don't know. I think it's people and machines somehow involved in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't personally know that it's going to be fully autonomous because I look at a lot of the crops that have been mechanized. Right, there's still people and equipment together. So I think it's going to be newer plants and genetics that help support maybe different planting styles, maybe stuff we haven't quite thought of with spacings or densities that are conducive to mechanized harvest to reduce the hard labor out in the field.
Right on. Thank you. Ted?
Well, my vision is this. In 5 years, or maybe it's 7 years, we have an oxbow machine going through with arms on it with a whoosh suction tube, picking size 88 oranges on demand, and all the rest of the oranges are left on the tree because the packing house that is going to has an order for 20 carloads of 88 size oranges. And that's the panacea. And that is highly achievable with all of the tools that we have in the toolbox. We just have to assemble them so that they're in one package that accomplishes that goal. That's the panacea for the citrus industry.
And a perfect segue to my dream. So when you talk about plant breeding, and I have my Green Venus hat back on right now, my hope is that from a genetics perspective and a plant breeding perspective, that we all embrace the power of the Nobel Prize winning technology. CRISPR gene editing is an amazing tool that will allow us to bring innovation to market in a much more precise way than standard conventional breeding. And we're going to be able to do it a heck of a lot faster. So when you think about all the tools that a breeder has in their toolbox, CRISPR is one very valuable tool that's going to allow us to move the needle. And if there are no other questions or comments from the panelists, I'm going to wrap up by just reiterating what we've heard so many times today, and that is that we are all stronger together. So I'm really excited about everyone putting their hand in the huddle. I hope that we don't get discouraged by the unforeseen bumps that we are sure to see in the road, but rather let's stay motivated, stay focused on the roadmap, and in 10 years, the industry will be reaping the benefits of all of our collaboration. Thank you.